It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of TAXI TV Live. I hope we're live. Anyway, I welcome everybody in the chat room, and I'd like to welcome my very special guest today, a guy who's become a good friend over the last few years. Just had lunch with him a couple weeks ago out here. This is Mr. Jim Thacker. Turn that down low. And today we're doing 10 things I wish I'd known in the beginning of my sync career with Jim Thacker. So let me read you a little bio on Jim, and then we're going to have some fun. Jim is a very thoughtful guy and expresses himself well and has a ton of stuff up here in his old canoodle. Jim Thacker is a producer, songwriter, musician with experience in many facets of the music industry, including an extensive track record of hundreds of placements in film, TV, and advertising. His catalog of his own material and material from collaborators has had multiple placements in the past year in films starring the likes of Robert De Niro, Jason Statham. I just saw a movie his the other night. It was awesome in it. Dennis Quaid, John Malkovich, John Travolta, and others, along with multiple television placements ranging from The Young and the Restless, which I know Jim never misses an episode of that, to SWAT. As a longtime TAXI member, Jim has made many of his friendships and connections via TAXI and largely through the road rally itself. So welcome to the big show, Jim. Glad to have you back. Glad to see you like twice in a week or two.
I know.
And just letting you guys in on a little secret. When Jim was in town the other day, we sat down and recorded a little tete-a-tete for about an hour, and I'll be cutting that up into snippets and putting it out on social media. By the way, if you guys aren't following us yet on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, just know that we've been posting daily updates where I just read like the headline from each one of the listings that comes out every day. So if you want an easy way to know what's going on, that's it. All right, so there's the chat room. Carosa, I can't hang here. Carosa, I'm sorry, dude, but every week it's like, I gotta go make spaghetti and meatballs, or gotta go get the cat
Greg.
from the vet. Enough already. Stick around for a whole episode, Carosa.
Come on, Greg.
I love Carosa. Anyway, so when Jim was out here, he said, there are all these things I wish I'd known in the beginning of my sync career. And I said, well, why don't we do an episode? So here we are. And don't you guys in the chat room forget to remind me when we're about 10 minutes away from the show being over that I am going to give away a free copy of this book with a transparent cover.
Wow, that's cool.
It makes really interesting reading when you open it up and can see right through it. Anyway, it's because it's got a green cover and I'm green screened, but you guys knew that. So, Jim, let's have at it. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me back. I always love doing these, and good to see you again, as you said, twice in 1 month.
Yep.
So,
quite a pleasure.
Nice to see you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think we got a good list of things for folks today.
I think you did an excellent job of putting these together, and it's a range of stuff, and I don't want to give anything away, so just jump right in. Do you want to start with number 10 and work your way up to the number 1?
Yeah, let's kind of do the old David Letterman thing and go backwards with number 10, I guess.
And afterwards, are we going to do some stupid pet tricks as well?
Yeah, that'd be great. If anybody remembers David Letterman, that show's been off the air for
hard
a
to
while.
recognize him with all of his beard. looks like the Luden's cough drop guys.
Yeah.
Oh, I did do Jim's bio. Andre says I didn't do it. Yeah. Andre, were you in the restroom? All right, here we go. And number 10.
So, and kind of these, just to preface it a little bit too, is I initially thought, okay, I started with TAXI about 10 years ago, and that was my second go around with TAXI. We've talked about that in the past. I was a TAXI member for a year, had a few forwards, things like that, and then had probably a period of 5 years where I didn't do anything with sync at all, actually. And then about 10 years ago, it was 2015, I got back into Sync and joined TAXI again, went to the rally in 2015. That was my first year going. And so it was kind of the 10 things I wish I knew 10 years ago when I started back in Sync. So, and number 10 goes right in line with that whole, when I started out 10 years ago, was how to correctly read taxi listings. That was really the first thing that I didn't know about when I started back in with TAXI 10 years ago. And it took me, I would say, a good 2 or 3 years to really get it. And some of it was trial and error. Some of it helped when I went to the rally, because there was even, I think, a class the second year I went on how to read listings or something. And of course, talking to other taxi members, got into how to look at listings and interpret them and read them. And there's always different things involved in there that can be a little elusive, let's say. But the first things that I learned, just, and on my list here, I made some notes for once in my life here. But I think if you pay attention to the tempos, the exact style of the examples in the listing, and listen to those references, because there's always references in a taxi listing, right? You guys generally have 3, sometimes more, but at least 3, examples of what they're looking for. And really that is, to me, tempo, instrumentation, and production. And sometimes it will be, like when I would get a curveball with the listing, would be when the references may be a little different than each other. And that was always the thing, because I was like, well, wait a minute, this one reference is a little bit different. It's a little more synth driven maybe than guitar driven or something like that. Which do I go for? And I know that's always, something that I hear people discuss, and it was something we all discussed, for the years I was, when I was doing listings and trying to figure that out. And I think that it boils down to those things of tempo, style, and kind of not so much instrumentation in that case, because sometimes, maybe, I think you always use the example, something that would be on the same playlist, right?
Right.
So you might be on Spotify and hear 3 songs. Well, one might be guitar driven, and the next one might be more synth driven, but a lot of times they will have some kind of thread that runs through them. And I think when you're listening to the references, look for that thread. I do know, just from my experience, up to today, that tempo has a lot to do with things. It really does. So, and I think right in the listings, you always have up tempo, or it might be mid tempo, or you're very specific about that side of things. And I would say pay real good attention to that, because tempo has a lot to do with pacing. Whether it's a film, a TV show, or a commercial, the pacing of that song has everything to do with what's going on with the visual. So that's one thing to really key in on, is the tempo, I would say. And we talk about this all the time. Number 2 that I didn't get at first was, make sure you're submitting songs that are appropriate to the listing. I used to send songs that were maybe a little adjacent, let's say, to what the listing was really looking for, and I'd ultimately get returns, because I'd send Americana in for bluegrass, or country song in for Americana, things like that, like very similar styles. Not that I was sending heavy metal in for Americana or something, but you can be kind of, right adjacent to the style that the listings are looking for, and be off mark. And I think you guys, TAXI's really good at being specific about the style. The references always refer to that style. So really be careful about sending things in that aren't appropriate for the listing. I did that for the first couple of years, and once I started to get that, and really, only sending things in when I had them, or when they were specifically right for listings, I saw my forwards go way up in year 3 and 4.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is like 80% of the material that gets rejected. We like to call it returned, because rejected would be like, your song sucks. That's rejection. I'm sorry, but this is not appropriate for the listing. That gets a return. It's a little softer landing on that one. But
yeah,
it is because people don't hit the mark. And I always wonder if people think, well, I know that this is a disco song and they ask for singer-songwriter. But when they hear it, they'll hear how incredibly good it is, and maybe they'll use it anyway, which will never, ever happen. Or
right.
Maybe they can imagine how it would be as a singer-songwriter song. But in both cases, you're hallucinating. That's magical thinking that's never, ever going to happen in the real world.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's that is the hope, right? Is, oh, the song is great, so I'll just send it. But you are kind of wasting your time and the other person's time at that point, because just wait for a listing to be appropriate for songs you have, or, I see so many different styles come across the listings for Taxi. It's unbelievable. Like, everything is covered. So, your style of music will come around, and obviously if you can produce a little bit of a range of musical styles, that's good. If you can learn to, or go into other styles, have your strengths, but then work with producers or other people who have other styles and strengths, and that gives you more opportunities for listing, things like that. But I think the only thing I had down, and I think you actually had a listing, didn't you, that you wanted to maybe discuss
here,
too?
I'll read it, and I sent Jim a copy of it so he can kind of go through and say what he thinks are the salient points. But the listing reads as such. Lots of country hip hop songs, as I like to call them, country hop, because I have to shorten them up for the subject lines on the emails. Lots of country hip hop songs with male or female vocals are needed by a legendary music licensing company with many decades of high-end placements in big TV commercials, hit shows, and blockbuster films to their credit. This company pays up front for an exclusive buyout deal. You'll get 100% of the writer's share and paid on your back end through your PRO. This company's searching for mid to up-tempo songs that could be found on a playlist with the following examples, which we got directly from them. Wild Ones by Jesse Murph featuring Jelly Roll. FAFO by Brian Martin featuring Charlie Faye, OG. OG Caden and Austin Tolliver. Love that name, Austin Tolliver. It sounds so country. And 180 Lifestyle by Morgan Wallen. Please submit original songs that seamlessly combine a strong country-inspired sound with modern hip-hop elements. The company is looking for tracks that have loads of energy and a masterful blend of the two genres. Your submission should include catchy motifs, modern productions, solid arrangements, memorable melodies, and well-written lyrics. Country and hip-hop instrumentation in the general wheelhouse of the reference songs will work best. Notice it says general wheelhouse. Please make sure that any virtual instruments or samples you use are of high quality and current sounding. Well-performed, confident vocals could help you seal the deal, and melodic and or rap vocals all work here. Tracks that strike the perfect balance between gritty hip-hop swagger and the fresh down-home vibe of country are going to work best. Lyrics that avoid the use of specific names, dates, times, places, brands, and profanity will work best. Do not copy the reference material in any way, shape, or form. Use it only as a general guide. The rest of it is kind of irrelevant to what you're going to talk about. I think it's boilerplate, as we call it around the office. What would you do if you had this listing sitting in front of you?
Well, it's interesting because you would set it up front too in this listing, but also the end of the listing is important to what I was going to say about this listing is the terms. I think you want to make sure with all
I got to
of
show
these
you the printer. Hold on. The printer ate page 4, and I didn't get the terms because they must have been on page 5. Sorry,
but that's okay. But you did reference them at the top of the listing.
Right.
Which is, I think there's a reason you did that, is because what stuck out to me, and I'll get into kind of reading the listing in a second, but what stuck out to me when you sent me this was it pays an upfront for an exclusive buyout deal. Now, this is a different kind of thing because what they're going to do is they're going to give you upfront buyout for the song. They're going to own the master and the publishing, and you'll keep 100% of your writer's share. So those are the terms that you have to be comfortable with and kind of know what that means. The upfront exclusive buyout means that they're going to own the master, they're going to own the recording that you send them, they're going to have 100% publishing share, and you're going to get 100% writer's share on any back end royalties. The pluses of this are that they are going to pay you up front. You're essentially getting a sync fee up front for the song. I guess the one downside is that if they place the song and they get a sync fee, you don't get a piece of that later.
Right.
So it
Whereas
really
a
just
similar deal where somebody does the same deal without giving you money up front for the buyout, you would probably do a 50-50 split on the sync
yeah.
fee.
Yeah, any sync fee they get for the song would be 50-50. So it's just, and again, I wouldn't say this is bad or good. It's just you have to be ready to be okay with the terms. Are you okay with those terms? Is that good for your music, for what you do? You just have to be aware of those terms. And that was my third thing on things that I knew, but I didn't know what everything meant when I first started. So really get your terms straight. If you have to research this stuff, I mean, I kind of explained what this deal is, but you have non-exclusives, you have exclusives, you have buyouts. There's a lot of different deals out there. So you just want to educate yourself on those as much as you can. Part of that is from doing listings and reading those terms at the bottom of the listings and say, well, what does this mean? And there's plenty of online references. You have to be careful because there's good and bad advice and good and bad references for these things. But you can always ask Taxi, or if you go to the rally, ask people, like, or on the forums, ask people, what does this mean? So there's so many resources, even just through Taxi, that you can use to find out what these terms mean and learn them. It's just learning about your business. It's a really important side of this.
Here's something a lot of people don't know is we actually have a glossary of terms right on our website, and nobody ever uses it, but it's there.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, like I said, even just within the Taxi universe, there's so many resources to figure out this stuff out. And usually, one thing I will say that I like on the forums is it's usually pretty good advice. And if somebody gives a little off advice, other people will jump in and be like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't quite, let's discuss this. And there'll be a good discussion, a healthy discussion about it. And some things are a little vague and a little up to interpretation. But, things like non-exclusive, exclusive buyouts, there's not much interpretation to it as long as somebody has had that experience and can help you. But so that's a big part of this. As far as reading the listing for what you are looking for musically, I mean, I don't know what I can add because this is so specific. And the way that you guys laid this out is so well written and so, again, specific. And I get it when I read this. What I would say is that people who aren't experienced might send in a hip hop song, right? Or might send in a country song. But you have to read between lines and say, no, the other term I've heard for this style of music is hip hop, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like it's hip hop and country together. And again, the references are exactly what they're looking for. It's country vocals usually, maybe with a rap section in the song, and a mix of, fiddle, banjo, even sometimes pedal steel mixed with hip hop beats for the music bed. So again, like I said, you just have to really break down the references and say, okay, is my song in this wheelhouse at all? And you even use that word, right? General wheelhouse. Would it be on a playlist with, Jesse Murph and Jelly Roll? If it's straight up country, it wouldn't be necessarily, at least on a country hip hop playlist. So you just, I'm reading this listing, and maybe it's because I have been doing this 10 years. It's hard for me sometimes to dig in, but I don't know how you could go wrong because it's pretty well laid out in this listing, exactly what these guys are looking for. It's not always the case. Sometimes sometimes the people are kind of looking for a little more of a range, but this is very specific on this listing. So again, if you read it, just listen to the tempos of these songs. And, with this, it's kind of, the tempos may be a little more of a range because they're not looking for something for a specific scene necessarily.
Right.
They're looking for a style. So you might have a little more leeway on the tempo with this one as you listen to songs. It's just the style in this case. So that's about all I can add because to me, this listing is really well written out and it makes sense, I think, to just about anybody who listens to the songs and reads what you're looking for. So the terms in this one would be the thing to be sure you're clear on.
I wish more people would just take a piece of paper and kind of bullet point the most salient points of a listing and then tape it somewhere close to their monitor so while they're working on stuff, they don't drift too far afield left or right of center because a lot of people start out wanting to create country hip hop And
Yep.
then something strikes their fancy while they're noodling and trying to find an idea or a part, and they make a left turn or a right turn, and as soon as you make that
Oh yeah.
turn, you're no longer going down the middle of the road for country and hip hop.
That, and that's a great point. And I used to do that. I would, after a while, I learned this, but I would just start a song and not go back and look at the listing. And by the time I finished the song, I was in a bit in left field.
Yeah.
But as I got more experience with doing listings, I would go back to the listings and the references, even when I was in a verse or a chorus in on the song. And I would be like, wow, what's my production starting to sound like? And I really would dial it in as I produced and wrote the song. I'd go back to listing many, many times. And the trick too, to me, was to listen to the references enough to get the idea, but be careful not to copy them. If you listen to them enough, you might start, just, subliminally copying melodies and things. You don't want to do that. But I really would, read the listing and listen to those references a number of times as you're producing the song. And that was something that I absolutely, probably by year 2 or 3, was doing a lot. Was returning the listing. I didn't have it, pasted up anywhere, but I opened it up many times and listened to my track versus that track. And the other side of things is if you get a return, like when I got returns, I would open the listing again, look at the critique and the return, and listen to my song again, and just really do those comparisons. And all of that, I think, lends to you getting better and better at kind of nailing the brief or the listing.
Could not agree more. Let's move on in the interest of time.
Sure.
What's your number 9?
How to produce radio ready, in quotes, tracks. So radio ready tracks, you hear that all the time, right? Or just well-produced tracks.
But is that different than broadcast quality, or is it essentially
no, same thing.
Okay.
Same thing. Broadcast quality, radio ready. Same term, I would say. To me, this boils down to something that I harp on a lot. I harp on a lot with artists that I work with, even as a producer. I ask them to just keep working on their productions, even if they can get to a point of recording drums, a keyboard, a guitar, and their vocal, let's say, to start with, that they can send me, and then I can dig in as a producer on the track, and I'm way further ahead than if they just sing me a melody or sing me a verse and chorus, and then I have to come up with everything. If some of the structure's there, you get way ahead. And then eventually, I know so many people who kind of get the production bug and they want to produce songs themselves. And now things are so accessible with Logic and everything, and there's online courses on YouTube, and like paid for courses that are really good, that you can get for Logic and any other DAW. I don't think there's any excuse not to produce your own tracks. And I think with technology today, you can get them broadcast quality if you work. It is work to get to that point, but I think you can do that. The other big thing I found, and I did this at a young age for many years, was sitting in the room with a good producer and engineer and just really watching what they're doing, take interest in it. Because I know a lot of artists, it's not as exciting to somebody who may be an artist or a singer. But then I have seen artists and singers take interest in it and ask their producer what they're doing or the engineer what they're doing. And next thing you know, they're producing their own tracks, or producing on their own. And of course, the other thing you can do if you are an artist or singer or guitar player, whatever it might be, is find a great producer to work with and just work in tandem. But again, if your production chops are at a point where you can produce something for them, producers love that, because then it gives them something to start with. I mean, I have people all the time, they'll send me just a real rudimentary drum track with some chords and them singing the melody. That's great, because then I can pop it into, or it's the whole Logic file maybe, or pop the tracks into Logic and just go to town, and I have something to build around. But at least they've sent me something that's recorded fairly well. Sometimes I might even end up using that vocal track if it's really great. If the vocalist did a great job on it, I might use the original demo track, vocal track sometimes, or have them augmented or something. And then the only other thing I would say about it, and it goes back to kind of the listings thing, is listen to those songs you like and want to produce and just dissect them. Like I think Robin talks about it in her book, right? Is like dissecting songs and listening to what the kick drum sounds like. Where is the vocal in the mix? I mean, there's 100 questions you can ask, but that's becoming a producer, is understanding how the music you like is produced. So I think all that, it leads to getting those radio ready tracks, whether you do it yourself or find a great producer or production team. There's even resources now where you can, online resources, even where people will produce tracks for you that are nice. There's things like air gigs where you can go and get a producer or a singer or things like that. And, it's a paid service. You have to pay for that. But it's, if that's the only way to get your track sounding broadcast quality, then do that for now and then keep working your production tracks. I mean, I always bring up John Pearson, but he did just that. He and I did a lot of songs together. And I would always say, John, can you get some production going and get Logic? And he finally did. And now, so probably that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, he's full on producer now. He does all his own tracks and everything. He just got really interested in it. And he went down that hole.
And he's not a 25-year-old who grew up computer savvy. I mean, it was a bridge to cross for him.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean this how it's going to sound, but if Pearson can learn it, if Matt Vanderbo can learn it, anybody can learn it.
Really, any of us. I mean, me too. I was lucky enough to get it at a very early age, and I had a teacher who was a producer that worked at Electric Ladyland and all kinds of things. So I was got the bug early. But I know so many people that, haven't started producing until the 50s or 60s, and they're great producers. You can do it at any age, certainly. And there's so many resources online to learn these things, and so many great tools just plugins and things. Logic itself has all kinds of built-in plugins. If you get that, you're on your way, and then you can kind of go down the rabbit hole I did, and you have thousands of other plugins. But there's so many tools to work with in production. It's it's fun once you get into it.
It's amazing how Logic has Drummer built into it. And I remember the day that Pearson figured out Drummer, and he called me up, you got to check this out. But it's a true statement that for $200, if you buy Logic, you get enough stuff in there. And I've got, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 gold and platinum records to my name, many of them with really big artists, and know my way around big time studios without trying to pat myself on the back. The point I'm trying to make is I'm blown away by all the free stuff that comes in Logic. You almost don't need to go buy any other plugins or anything, and you could make record quality, great sounding stuff with just that $200 program. You don't need to go out and buy 150 other plugins. You could, because it's fun. It's like putting glass pack mufflers on your car, but you don't absolutely need those.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And I think, I haven't used the mastering side of Logic too much because I have so many great mastering plugins. But the only thing I would say, maybe the first thing you would buy outside Logic is mastering plugins, because there's some that are just phenomenal to really put that end result on your track. And the reason I say that too is because I have a lot of artists that work in Logic, and they'll do their production and kind of do some mastering, and they'll send it to me, and I run it through my mastering chain, and they're just blown away. It brings everything out. It makes everything pop. So I would say Logic first, and then there are some great mastering plugins that that just are phenomenal, and they do an amazing job at making tracks sound that radio ready and that broadcast quality, as you said. And that's a big part of the chain that people need to learn is mastering. Again, I know a couple, I think John may be one of them, that does his whole production and then he sends it out to mastering because it makes that much of a difference. So mastering your tracks, I'm glad, you brought that thing up about Logic and the too, because that probably is one thing to focus on as well, is getting your tracks mastered. I don't know that, there's so many AI tools now where you throw it into an AI tool and it's supposed to master it. I'm not 100% sold on that yet. They sound good, but I still think if you really get them inside, and I use AI-powered mastering tools, but like Isotope and things like that, but I still tweak the heck out of them, and I still use my ears, and I still use comparison to references. I'll be like, well, the AI side of things didn't really nail it, so I'm going to go in and mess with it. I'm not just going to use this automatic setting that they have. I'll go in, I'll use one that I like, and then really tweak it and add an extra maximizer or something, whatever I need to really beef up the track. So it's kind of a combination of modern AI tools and using your ears. And
but you've got to train your ears, and you do that by listening to the genre. None of this stuff is achievable in an hour or on a Saturday or a whole weekend. It takes a little time, but I've seen so many people who started literally at 0 and are now at like 8.5 on the scale of expertise. And that's enough to go very far. But a lot of it is just common sense. Think when I first started out sitting behind consoles, I remember somebody said to me, just think of every channel strip like it's a stereo. You can pan things to the left, center, or right. You can add treble, mid-range, or bottom, or subtract any of those. You can add reverb to make it sound like it's in a room or a hall or wherever. And compression. And compression basically keeps things sounding a little louder than they do without it, because you are able to get it closer to the red line without having it scream into it. That's the kind of a very basic way to explain it. But if you understand those things on an instrument, then to understand mastering, that's all mastering is tone and compression, overall tone and compression on the whole track. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Let's do number 8.
All right. Number 8, the importance of collaboration and building a team. So it kind of goes into what I was just talking about with production, right? But it also makes sense with co-writing and co-producing. And that's something that the reason I say I wish I knew 10 years ago for me is that I was completely just doing it on my own. Just writing tracks, producing them, singing them, doing everything, and that was great for learning, I think. But the minute I started co-writing and co-producing with people, and one of the first people was John Pearson. I bring his name up because we met at the rally in line, and we're both from Nashville, hadn't known each other, but we met each other in LA in the line at TAXI. And, so when we get back, let's write together. And we started writing here for like artists in Nashville and things like that. And we go to publisher pitches here in Nashville together. But we also started doing sync together and taxi listings and things together. And that co-writing with him and co-producing, was really early on. That's when I got into it. And then I started working with a bunch of artists and a bunch of other co-writers in Nashville. I had already been co-writing in Nashville, but really digging in on it and digging in the sync world on it, it made a huge difference. And then getting into even doing instrumental music with other writers. I did a ton of instrumental music for a while, and I would even do that with collaborators. And it's just one of those things where in the sync world, it's a numbers game, so you want to get a lot of music out there, especially in the instrumental world of sync. So I would just co-write with people all the time, and one guy would be in the library that he worked with, I would be in a library that I worked with, and we'd help each other get collections into those libraries. There's so many things about collaboration and co-writing and things beyond just producing better music. It's that networking and all that thing. So, and I think I put one other thing about that was that, lean into your strengths. If you're a great guitar player or a great singer, bring that to the table and find somebody who can produce great tracks, or somebody who plays guitar if you sing, or does great lyric if you do great production, whatever it might be. Find people who, are strengthen your weaknesses and lean into your strength and bring that to the table to begin with, because then you can branch out and do other things. And that's certainly what I did. My prize strength was production and guitar and bass playing. And then I just branched out into doing more writing and things like that as I went on. So it's like, just bring your strengths to the table and see what happens, and find people who fill in those gaps.
Just so that people who aren't familiar with how most TAXI members collaborate, the vast majority of them aren't as fortunate as the aforementioned Mr. Pearson and Mr. Thacker are, that they live in the same town. And the funny thing is, even though they live in the same town, I bet you there's plenty of times that you guys are sending files back and forth on computer, and you're not sitting in the same room. But just so everybody who's new to this understands how it works, is, let's say Jim initiates the session. He calls up Pearson and says, "Hey, I just heard a thing that you and I would be great on together. You'll have better ideas for the lyrics than I will. I think I've got a good solid idea for the track." So Jim will lay down the track, and then send the session file over via the internet to John Pearson, and Pearson will sit down and noodle on lyrics and send it back. What do you think? And blah blah blah. So that's how it's done. It's not like you both have to be online in a online collaboration room. It's a lot of people collaborate with people in Europe and other parts of the world where the time difference is actually their friend, because while one of you has just finished a track and gone to bed, the other one can be working on it while you're sleeping, and you wake up to the track being at its next stage of completion. Kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. I know a few teams that do that, and it's nice. I mean, that's got to be a nice advantage. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. John and I had the advantage of being in the room a lot of times early on where we'd write the lyric and write the basic changes, but then the rest of it was all done virtually. I mean, he lives about 45 minutes from me or something like that. At the time he did. And so he would send me the bass part, and I'd send him the bass, drums, and guitar, and he'd do a demo sing over it so we could send to a vocalist or whatever. So we did everything virtual pretty much beyond the initial writing session. And you can do that obviously over Zoom if you want to get the lyric down and the basic structure down, and then everything else can be done completely virtual.
Has John Pearson ever played his song Cows for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was when I first met him at the Durango Songwriter Showcase, easily 10 years ago or more. And he got up there in front of the ballroom and performed Cows. That was the high point of the entire weekend for me. And
that's funny.
Yeah, I loved it. I think
that's a funny song.
I'm generally kind of shy, and I'm not somebody who will like walk up to people after they come off stage and go, man, that was great. But I had to give him props on that one. It was so good.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to number 7, how to break the fear of rejection/failure.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one, right? I mean, and it's something that I think we continually struggle with as creatives and things like that. But I really have somehow broken through that wall of it doesn't faze me much anymore. And it just probably took 10 years
really
of getting rejected. And, it started before the 10 years ago of getting into sync really heavy. But even before that, I was always musician, writer, showing music to my friends or going to publisher pitches in Nashville. It's a big one, right? It's complete rejection with no qualification. So there's no critique in these. If you go to a publisher pitch in Nashville 9 times out of 10, you play your song and it's pass, or it's either pass with no comments or I'll take a copy. So either way, you don't get a lot of feedback. There's just 50 people in the room, and these people listen to the songs quickly. You might get a little feedback if they really like it. But so I went to, I can't even tell you how many of those, and it was just pass, 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 pass. A few times I'll take a copy of this, and a couple of times I got, this is great. I'd love to run it by one of my published writers, those kind of things. So you get those pinnacles. But most of the time, it was pretty just flat rejection. So that helped me get a little bit of a thick skin to begin with and realize, okay, this is just a process. But then I think the 10 years of doing sync at so many different levels, I learned to get by rejection so quickly. I think it is just, it sounds simplified, but I think it is just going through it so many times. You don't feel like less attached to the music necessarily, or like not disappointed. I wouldn't say that, because anytime that I pitch a song, especially now for opportunity that I might have, and I don't get the spot in a film, I'm disappointed. But I'm also, the other thing too is if you get busy enough, I'm also already on to 5 other pitches, right? So it's like you just have to keep going and realize that those rejections or returns, whatever you may call them, are part of this process. And one of the other things too, I talk about this, I know I've talked about it with you before, but is that whole TAXI gauntlet of submitting, and just keep submitting. And whether you get a return or a forward, just keep submitting, because you're building this library of songs. And you would be surprised, some of those songs that got returned because maybe you sent something that wasn't right for the listing that we talked about earlier, that song might be right for something else. It might be perfect for something else, and it may get a placement. That happened to me so many times. Once you realize that, go through that kind of gauntlet, I think you really do realize that, hey, the rejection doesn't mean, I mean, maybe, I'm sure I have songs that do suck, but maybe it probably most of the time doesn't mean the song's terrible overall. It's just not right for that situation or that artist or that listing or that what brief, whatever it might be. And the more times you go through that, it really is easier to just say, okay, great, and you don't give up on the song necessarily, especially if you genuinely feel that it's got a shot at something. But sometimes you do want to revisit and be like, well, why has this song been rejected 8 times or 10 times? Something is going on, and you see common threads, and some of those songs you just have to let go and realize that was a learning song, we'll call it.
I'm glad you brought up the common threads, because if one person tells you the vocal's too loud, you might go, wonder if they're right. If two people tell you, you go, oh, there might be something to that. If 3 people tell you, pretty darn sure that vocal's too loud.
Exactly. Yeah, or it could be any of that. But I think that the short answer to this, and as simplified as it does sound, is just going through it. Just get yourself out there and put your songs out there and really listening to that feedback. And just try to be objective. It's impossible for any of us to really be objective about our own art, but I think you do end up always looking for an opportunity to learn. Like now, if a song is rejected or doesn't work, I'll even wonder what happened. 9 times out of 10, it's just that another song was better for that opportunity or better for what they were looking for. It's as simple as that.
And you're talking about now on the music supervisor, because I want everybody to understand that TAXI screeners never compare one submission to another. So if they're if they're listening to song number 47 in their playlist that day, and even if it's better than number 3, which they forwarded, they don't go back to number 3 and go, well, it's not as good as number 47. There's a bar. If it's over the quality bar and on target, it gets forwarded. But when you are in the world of pitching to supervisors, if you're a library owner and you're sending stuff to supervisors, they do compare which one works better with the scene. Well, always win the date.
Such a great point. But even when going back to what you said about TAXI listings, let's say that 10 songs get forwarded for a particular listing. The end user or client is going to compare those 10. They're going to listen to all 10 of those songs and say, well, which one is the best for my opportunity? And even versus another 20 or 30 songs over here that they receive. So you have to, you're competing in a larger pool there, but somebody at some point is going to make a value judgment. And sometimes the thing about the rejection word too in this world is that you don't even realize, I think we might talk about this a little more, so I won't go in depth, but you don't even realize on the other end, the producer of a film, for example, might start off wanting singer-songwriter and end up a month later deciding he wants hip hop for the same spot. Like they may completely change their thought or their artistic vision of the scene and be like, well, you know what, singer-songwriter isn't correct for this. I'm going to use hip hop instead. Right. So you just don't know. You can't look at that as rejection as much as just, you have to, again, just keep getting yourself out there. So I think that's the short answer. The other thing I will say real quickly about this one is for me, it really helped to read things like The War of Art and all of the books by Pressfield. I'm also kind of a fan of the Tony Robbins stuff. He talks about rejection all the time. And I listen to that stuff at length, especially early on as a musician, because it really would bother me. And I just found ways around rejection, whatever it took, like reading good books, putting that kind of good stuff in of realizing that, rejection is an opportunity most of the time to learn, if nothing else. So, I mean, those kind of things I think just all blend together because I know rejection and kind of that even fear of it stops a lot of people.
Boy, so doesn't it?
So.
That's an understatement. Well, this one's the next one on your list, number 6, is actually very, very related to rejection.
It is.
It's how to fail fast and move on quickly. Let's hear more on that because I could not agree more.
Yeah, and I kind of answered that one in the last number 7, but yeah, it's kind of the same thing of just learning that there's another song. You're going to create another song. There's going to be another listing. There's going to be another opportunity, maybe even for that same song. So you learn to just kind of throw things out there and fail fast. But I think in that, listen. You said it earlier for number 7 as well. Is listen to that feedback. Respond to it. If you're getting the same kind of feedback 5 times for the song, really need to take that to heart and either change the song or move on to a different song or whatever it might be. I think a lot of times it's just keep creating too. Like in the fail fast thing is get your music out there, keep, having successes and failures with it. But I think moving on quickly is so important. And I think the more you do, the easier that is. One thing I will say is like my second or third year into TAXI, and going to the rally and doing submissions, I was probably, I think the second or third year I was with TAXI, I did like 80 submissions that year. It's quite a bit,
Yeah,
So
a little overzealous, possibly.
maybe, and probably so, because I think a lot of the things I was rushing, but it also did get me to create much quicker. I was kind of like a machine. I had at the time, I had a day gig where I was working like 8 hours a day, and I would just go into the studio at night for 4 or 5 hours and go to bed every day,
Wow.
and then spend the whole weekend in the studio. Didn't have a girlfriend at the time, let's put it that way. But I, was just like a machine on it, and I just kept producing music the best I could, and trying to take that feedback to heart, and still being disappointed in all those things we talked about, but just learning that, okay, I'm going to do another song. I'm going to try again. If a listing would pop up, and I had a song in that vein, I would always write another song. And I'd probably send a song that I maybe improve a song that I sent for that same genre, but then write another one so I could send two songs into a listing. So it's just that constant creating and constant learning that, fail fast might be the right way to put it, but just keep creating and keep moving no matter what happens. But you also do have to, take stock in what people are telling you, and to be able to kind of move on, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have anything to add to that,
A
but that's the way I
jagged
look
pill
at
to
it.
swallow is, listening to other people. And if I may, I'd like to add a qualifier. Your wife, girlfriend, mother, or children are probably not your best barometer, because they love you and they don't want to hurt your
Right.
feelings and they want to be supportive, but they don't understand the norms in the industry. They don't know
Right.
what good is or great is in the industry. So I
Right.
want to suggest to everybody that they go to the Taxi Forum and they post in the peer-to-peer section, and they put their song up there, and they put, or instrumental, and they put the actual text from the whole listing up there and say, hey everybody, I'm thinking about submitting this for that listing. Do you think it's a good pitch? And if it's not, you're going to save $5 and you're going to learn something. And
Yeah.
generally speaking, my personal experience on the forum is the people who are newer to the forum are usually the first to chime in, because they just are. They're excited to be there, and their opinions may not be seasoned or experienced enough yet to be as valid as, like, now Jim would be an experienced opinion, Matt Vanderbo would be an experienced opinion,
Right.
John Pearson would be an experienced opinion, and these guys are on the forum. So guys who've gone from zero to hero are actually giving you masterclass level free advice, because they're happy to be in this community of super supportive people. So take
Yep.
advantage of it. It's sitting right there in front of your face.
That's a great point, and I agree 100%. And that, I think that comes out of people like Matt and John and myself being in that same situation and getting that great feedback, and it made all the difference. So, the old term is pay it forward, but it's true. I love giving people advice that send me songs, because I know what it's like, to kind of be out there. You feel sometimes like you're in a vacuum, but if you can get good, solid, constructive advice, there's nothing like that. And the forum is a great place for that. I think you're right. You do want to filter through and make sure, you're going to get a lot of different opinions and a lot of different advice, because music's so subjective. But what you said about friends, relatives, family is so true, because number one, they do love you. Number two, they don't know how a music supervisor listens to something. They don't know how producers pick music for TV, film. They just don't have that
Right.
concept. So it's a much different view, much different place that they come from. And to them, I know a lot of my relatives just thought it was magical that I could play guitar, because none of them really played music. So you already win with those folks, because they think music is like this magical thing, which it is, of course. But I mean, it also, when you get into the realm of people picking music for TV, film, advertising, the business side comes in and the budgets come in, and the magic kind of falls away a little bit at times. But it's funny though. I say that, but I still get, like, I'll get supervisors contact me so excited because they got a song of ours placed, and they're just excited that the music worked and the producer loves it. So there is still that magical side of music, even in the cold light of business. It's still nice that still is a thing with music. It still lights people up, which is really cool.
I just see Michelle from Two Swans in the chat, and I want to give a shout out. Michelle, I went to look for something in my 2024 calendar book. Yes, I still use a paper book because I keep them around forever and go back and find stuff. And I saw that I had a note to call you or respond to you about wanting to teach at the road rally or something. So forgive me. I missed it in the run up to the road rally, and it looked like it was probably too late. Like the classes were kind of etched in stone at that point. So my apologies. Thank you for letting me make it publicly. All right. Thank you for letting me take that little intermission there, Jim. Let's move on to number 5. Oh, man. Oh, how to break from the perfection, preciousness mindset.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. And before I start, I'm going to say hi to Michelle, too. And she's great. She's a great example of a collaborative team. She works with Todd, who's just a great producer. And they are just like always producing music. And so I know them, and they're a great example of what we talked about with collaboration and just keep going and keep producing music. And they're doing all the right things. So good to see Michelle on here. But yeah, I'll say hi to her, too. So... so number 5, how to break from the perfection preciousness mindset. Okay. So this is a good one. And I still sometimes fight with this, but it's still a work in progress for me for sure, but I've gotten a lot better at it. And some of that comes from, it's funny, as I wrote these and as I did notes on them, I found out they're all so interrelated. It's like this one big network or nexus of things. It's really crazy when I started looking. I'm like, well, that's related so closely to that, because when you think about like the perfectionist mindset, if you're having to produce a lot of music and move quickly and meet deadlines and do that, you have to let go at some point. You don't have time to say, oh, that guitar tone isn't exactly what I want, or that whatever it might be in the track. You have to submit that song at a certain point. So that deadline, that issue of having to be, once you get in that whole zone of submitting songs, then you do have to let go. You can only hold on to a song for so long, or you're not going to submit it, and then that's kind of defeats the entire point of wanting to be in the world of sync, I guess. So, and I think early on for me, like 10 years ago, doing those listings, like when I said I did 80 in a year, I think that was a good thing, because I was doing, that's more than, I don't know how that breaks out, but it's not quite 2 a week or whatever that is, right? So I was doing songs.
Let me break out my calculator.
So 80 divided by...
My phone is so 52. Cool. My phone is so cool, it's got a calculator and a camera in it.
Is that new AI stuff they talk about?
Exactly. All right, so 80 songs divided by 52 weeks in a year, you average 1.54 per week.
So 1.5 songs a week. So that was the good thing, because if you're doing that, even, and I know some people are doing more than that, but if you're doing that, even, you don't have time to stop and really get precious with things. You want them to sound really good. You want them to be, as we talked about, broadcast quality, and you want people to take notice of them, but you don't have time to I, as a producer early on, especially, I would get so granular about everything. It was like, I would drive myself crazy. I would do 40 mixes of a song.
Why?
And I still wouldn't be happy.
People I know you well enough to know that you're a very intelligent, pragmatic, nice, very normal guy. Why would you get so nitpicky? Were you worried that they would hear it, go, "That's a great song, works perfectly for the scene, but I wish that guitar tone had more bite"? What is the fear?
I don't know. It was definitely fear-based. I think you're right on about that. I think it was just being thinking it had to be perfect to the ridiculous degree. Or I would, I'd go to bed with a mix and I'd wake up in the morning and listen to it in my car or something, and the bass would be a little heavy, so I'd have to remix it. I just was that kind of, and I know a lot of producers and engineers do that, but it was ridiculous when I first started. I think, too, when you get a little better and you have the feedback, again, why I said these are all related, because you start to know, okay, this worked before, right? If you have a way of mixing a certain style of music and it's working and you're getting placements, why change it at that point? Then you're kind of on a roll, and you don't have to be as perfectionist in a weird way. You can like, okay, now I know where that spot is, where the track sounds good, the lyric is good, and all those things within a song are good, but I don't have to go further. I don't have to try to make it a perfect thing. It is kind of funny now when I go back and I write with people in Nashville, because Nashville people are wordsmithing. You know, they're always wordsmithing words, and the lyrics have to all relate to the hook, and everything has to be in its proper place, and every line has to be a wow, you know. And I actually had a write session last week like that, and I love that. But at some point during those sessions, because I've done so much sync, I'm usually the one who says, guys, we got to move on. You know, we can't get this perfect word or this perfect rhyme here. Let's move on. And some writers here are perfectionists that way. And that ends up in great songs too, but you can drive yourself crazy with it. And I think that all of that has allowed me to let go a little bit. And part of it is just forced that I have to get that song in. Like if I have a song that's due tomorrow, it has to be ready by tomorrow morning. You know, so I can only be so much a perfectionist with that, or I'm not going to stay up all night. I'm not going to do that, or, you know, whatever. So it's just learning those things, I think.
Speaking of Nashville perfectionism on lyric craft, and they're masterful. There is no other town on the planet Earth that even comes close to having that many people that are that expert. And you think, like, if you haven't been to Nashville 50 times, you might think, I just wrote the best song of my life. This lyric is amazing. And it probably has 2 or 3 amazing parts in it. But you take it to Nashville, and if a publisher does give you feedback, they'll go word by word. Now, see, right there, that should be and, not but, because and ties them together as a couple.
Right.
But tears them apart as a couple. That's the kind of stuff that you hear there. So, all that to say that I used to have panels where we would have film and TV people and record company people in the same listening panel. And every time the record company people, especially guys from Nashville, were on a panel and a song got played, and it was like kind of bad enough where they really didn't have any constructive feedback. They didn't know what to latch onto first. And their response so frequently is, that would be really good for sync. They think that sync is like a lower form of life, and that it is a more achievable form of success in the music industry, just because there are way more opportunities, and they don't care about the difference between and but. They care about, does this make you laugh more in my scene, or cry more in my scene, or want to get up off the couch and go stick that pizza in the oven, whatever they're looking for. So, but yeah, there were plenty of people on those panels to go, wow, I think that might ought to be really good for television.
Yeah, it is, and it you know, sync is definitely more popular in Nashville than it's ever been. Everybody's doing sync, and even all the you know, you hear Lainey Wilson everywhere now. She's in Yellowstone. She's in Twister, the new Twisters movie or whatever. She was in that. So people in Nashville get it now that it's a great opportunity, even the bigger artists. But it is interesting. Yeah, that's a thing that took me a big transition, because I came here to be a quote unquote writer, and I was writing for artists and things like that. And then when I got into sync, after a little while, it almost became pretty freeing, because I didn't have to worry about those things, especially lyrically, as much. Your tracks still need to sound really great, and you still need to have good melodies, an interesting lyric, and all that, but it doesn't have to be that perfection. And even in country music, they've let go of that a little bit, I think, since the days of, you know, the story song is coming back a little bit. But when we were in the era of the story song in Nashville, it was, I mean, those songs are amazing, but every line was like, I listen to them now and I'm like, every line is like a work of art, and that's great. But achieving that level does take some more perfection. So I think that the only other thing I'll say about this for time is that I think it really, and I've said this about a few of the things, is just jumping in and doing it. You know, attending events without thinking about it, you know, that kind of thing, and just being, you know, that's another side where perfection comes in. So my first rally or two, I mean, I felt like I had to have everything prepared and be perfect, you know, and have everything ready for the rally. And I realized, you talk about this, and I think it's a great point, is that I realized that all of the stuff I brought the first year or two of the rally, I don't think it's ever seen the light of day. I'm going to be brutally honest. I think it's still on my computer here. Everything after that there's probably a really good percentage of it that's either in libraries or placed, at least 50% or more of that music that I produced after learning. So I think that's proof that I was worried about being perfect before I went to the rally. And you've talked about this at length. I think just going and diving in and not worrying about that perfection was way more beneficial to me than trying to be perfect. I mean, I worked so hard to have these songs, and they weren't ready from a sync standpoint until I learned what the heck is this all about.
And you know
I
what? A
had to
lot of
jump in.
people always ask the question, how big does my catalog have to be before I join Taxi? And I would say goose eggs, baby, zero, because
Yeah.
chances are the stuff that you wrote before you really understood sync is not going to work. So you just spent a year building a catalog of worthless stuff. And even if you know what is going to work in sync, unless you've done enough library deals and have a couple libraries in your mind, like, okay, if I do this dramedy thing, but with some quirky little Middle Eastern instruments, I bet that catalog would take it. And you may be right because you've worked with them before. But
Yeah.
Jim is absolutely right. Show up with nothing in the basket and learn about what kind of stuff should go into the basket, then start making it. Filling orders. You know what? We were talking about this at lunch the other day. You walk into a restaurant and it's like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and you order whatever, New York strip steak, $47, and and they bring you out lasagna, and you look at it and go, wow, I got to say, I took a bite and it's incredible lasagna, but it's not what I ordered.
Right.
Music, even in the record part of the industry to a large extent, but even more so in sync, give them what they ask for.
Yeah.
Where else are somebody going to give you a target to shoot at, a clearly defined target, and a deadline to motivate you? Anyway,
Yeah, and one last thing I'll add there too. That's because it's important on what you said, is that jump in and do the rally and do the listings. That was so informative to me, and I did have to, even though I was trying to be perfect with a lot of those things, you do have to expect that there's going to be a lot of that doesn't ever see the light of day. You have to learn somehow. And that's what I loved, especially in those first few years with Taxi, was those listings and going to the rally. I was bringing my music that I did have and learning, oh, that didn't work at all, or this worked. And then I think the third or fourth year, I brought a song in to one of the panels, and it got picked in the panel, and it just really was well received. And I was like, wow. So then I hit on it, and it took all of that other writing. And you just, you hear the Beatles say, and one of their famous quotes is something like they wrote 100 songs to get to one good one. And that's the Beatles talking. And my joke about that is always, I want to hear those other 99 songs that probably never made the records. But, if the Beatles are saying that, then you do have to write a lot. You just have to get good at what you do. And that's not to say be perfectionist about it, but you have to be as good as you can in that moment and just produce what you can and present it to people. That does mean letting go of the perfectionist thing, because somebody's going to tell you something that'll change your perception of how you write or how you create. And that's the best way to learn, is literally just, I guess, getting your butt kicked a little bit that way, in a good way.
Yeah, don't put your tail between your legs and run home.
Yeah.
Let's go on to number 4, letting go of the imposter syndrome. I think the phrase imposter syndrome started coming to the fore around the time I started Taxi in 1992. And frankly, I don't know if I had the syndrome or questioned whether or not I had imposter syndrome, but I thought about it a lot. It's like, who am I to tell these people their music is right or wrong, good or bad? So define imposter syndrome, and then carry on with whatever you want to add to that. But it's important to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that it may be a little different for everybody, but I think most people have experienced that situation where, you're in a situation or doing something, and your subconscious or your inner voice takes over and says, boy, I'm really not qualified for this, or what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing, or why am I here? And I think that I think again, how related all these things are. For me, it's the experience of just doing it over and over, to the point of where I realize, maybe I do have music that people would use, or maybe I do have something to say that people would be interested in hearing, or whatever it is. I think, because for me, the imposter syndrome is that I'll say, so it was probably 3 years ago that I got up on the panel at the rally with Mason. And when I got up there, it hit me. I got up there and I'm like, what am I
Why
doing
am
on
I
this
here?
stage? Had spent the last 7 or 8 years in the audience. And all of a sudden I was up on stage telling people my thoughts or whatever. And I had to fight it a little bit to be like, do I really have something to say that's going to contribute? I think that, to me, that's also helped me get over imposter syndrome. Is now, that was 3 or 4 years ago. I've done a lot of conventions and a lot of talking to people about this sync world. I think it also is a matter of the fact that I go into it thinking, and this is exactly why I did this list, is I go into it thinking, how could this help somebody for where I was 10 years ago? Or, I go into it not thinking about myself, right? I think that helps with imposter syndrome in a weird way. If you go into it thinking about how can you contribute to this or how can you add to this, probably partially easier for me because years of a bass player, the bass player is really just adding. You're not getting a lot of notice, unless you're Victor Wooten or Jaco Pastorius or somebody. As a bass player, you're contributing to a greater. And I think that helps kick the imposter syndrome out really good because you're just thinking about how can I contribute to this situation or how can I help somebody who maybe is where I was 10 years ago, for example. And that's where situations now I don't feel that way hardly at all. Like in doing these or doing a panel, the first couple, it was a struggle. Because I was like, boy, do I have anything to add? Am I knowledgeable enough? Am I going to say anything that people will even care that I'm talking about? All those kind of thoughts enter your mind. Same thing with music. When I first started sending things into TAXI, I was like, boy, is this stuff even good enough? Should I even be sending this in? And I just got over that and just went for it.
And I think everybody has that thought. You certainly weren't alone.
Yeah, I think that's the best. Again, like I've said about a few of these things, is it's just really doing it over and over. Just force yourself into it. Even just ignore that voice of doubt, and maybe you will trip over yourself. And I've done it plenty of times, especially in musical settings where I've messed up, on a performance or something and gone home and just beaten myself up and felt like crap. But you just have to go through that enough times, I think, to really get it out of your system. And you will get better at whatever you're doing that feels like you shouldn't be doing or whatever.
You mentioned Jaco. I've got to throw this in there. I don't think I've ever told you this before. Back when I was early in my career, but starting, I was drifting out of engineering a little bit and drifting into production. Sometimes I would be doing both on a record, and sometimes I would do demos, 6 months before we actually did the record. And if I needed a bass player, I would call Jaco and pay him $50 because he lived in Fort Lauderdale, like 7 minutes from the studio that I had there. Yeah. And here's Jaco Pastorius, who was already like jamming with Weather Report, but not in the band yet. On his own, he was only famous in tight jazz circles, not to the public. So I probably have 40 or 50 songs on cassette where Jaco is playing like a country bass part for $50.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing, especially as a bass player to hear that. I'd love to hear those.
Yeah. I'll have to dig one out someday and play it for you. It was really hard for him to keep it simple.
I can imagine. He was such a great bass player. It was hard for him to get gigs because he would play so many notes. He'd have to be in a band like Weather Report where it was jazz or fusion.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing on letting go of the imposter syndrome because, hold on, wait for it. When I think, let's see if I can get this straight. When I think that I'm having an issue with imposter syndrome, it makes me blue in the face.
I'm glad you brought that up.
All right, now let's see if I can return myself to normal.
It's either like an old Star Trek episode or Blue Man Group. That's all I could think of.
All right, there I am.
If I could do that, we could be the Blue Man Group up here.
There you go.
We'd probably have copyright infringement. We'd have copyright infringement.
Probably. Okay, so let's move on to number 3, how important are conventions like the Taxi Road Rally for furthering your career?
Yeah, and I put this one pretty high because it was critical. I've talked about it at length before, if anybody has seen any of the other discussions we've had, but it was critical. I can't even use another word that's strong enough.
Life-changing.
But it was life-changing. It just, I mean, all of those adjectives that describe it, game changer. Just because the more I went to them, the more people I met, the more collaborators I met, the more I learned about this industry, what works, what doesn't. Just kind of breaking out of the imposter syndrome by there were many times when I'd be like, why would I go to that convention? Nobody wants to meet me, or that kind of self-talk, that ridiculous self-talk. I think all of those things were broken by in a good way, by the conventions. And, and the other thing too, Taxi Rally is an exception on this too, is meeting people in the industry, handing them my music, being able to have that opportunity to just show music. And if nothing else, get feedback or get, positive feedback. I ended up in many libraries through that, meeting people through the listings and through the rally. I ended up just, getting a lot of opportunities for my music. So I think that's, all of the above was just, it's a no-brainer to me to go to. And even if, like, I've been to some of the conventions that aren't so great and they were lousy. I won't name names, of course. But,
oh, come on,
but no way. But even those were, good. Like I even if I met one or two people and I was collaborating, or one or two artists that I worked with as a producer, that would always happen. No matter what was going on at the convention, there was always just great people around. And, maybe, and I don't even mean lousy convention. I just mean not right for me, for what I was doing at the time. Maybe it was more tech oriented or something, that I went to a couple that were very tech oriented in the industry in like a different way, like radio tech and things like that. And I that wasn't my thing, but I just went to these just to go. Even like NAMM, NAMM's a great convention, but it just makes me want to buy a bunch of gear. And I met a few people there, but it's not like the road rally where there are so many like-minded people. It's just it's just one of those things. I just can't suggest it any higher than I already have so many times, is to get yourself there. I always use that example of that first year I was with Taxi, which was, I don't know how long ago now, probably 25 years ago. I didn't go to the convention. And I really, that's one, you talk about little regrets, is I kicked myself because I think it would have been different and I would have gotten to sync earlier. I would have probably stuck with it a little more if I had gone to the convention that year. But I talked myself out of it at the time, 100 different ways.
Yeah,
it was a long way to travel. I was living in Boston. I had to travel all the way to LA. I didn't have the money at the time. All of those, and none of them were real. I could have made it. I could have made it happen, but I didn't. But then the second time around, when I joined 10 years ago, I went the very first year, and that was it. I was hooked, and I loved it, and everything made a lot more sense, and it just really helped me turn the corner in the world, certainly in the world of sync, and just in everything, production, writing, all of it. So again, the only thing I could say is about rallies and in other conventions is just go to them. No matter what maybe that is imposter syndrome or whatever that voice in your head is saying, don't go. I would say leave that all aside, especially if you're a music creator, producer, artist, whatever it might be. If it relates to you and you really have the desire to do things in the world of, I'm just going to say music, not even sync, but especially sync, or music for TV, film, advertising. Same thing. Is just, there's no reason not to go. I think it's kind of a no-lose situation.
People they come up with reasons because they don't want to feel guilty for not going, because they have heard it from enough of our successful members that credit the rally with a lot of their success. Yeah. So they come up with these reasons. And for a lot of people, it's like, my spouse, my husband or my wife would get really upset with me. Drop $1,000, $400, assuming they're coming from like the East Coast or Canada or somewhere. $1,000 because you're going to spend $400 or $500 on airfare, and you're going to spend the same amount on a hotel room. By the way, stay at the Westin LAX. Don't Airbnb. Don't try and save $20 a night by not staying in the hotel, because you may have saved $60 overall, but you have definitely screwed yourself out of golden opportunities. Oh yeah. So many relationships relationships have started in that elevator going up to, floor 9. And oh man, I saw you on a panel earlier. Got to say, when you said blah, 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 that was really great. Oh, what's your name? My name's Bob.
Yeah.
What kind of music do you make, Bob? That's how stuff happens organically at the rally. So if you're staying in an Airbnb, you don't get that. But here's a tip. For people whose spouses or you're afraid to go to your spouse, or your spouse will squelch the idea, just know that the road rally is only about 15 minutes away from Disneyland. So what you do is say, I've got a great idea, honey. Let's go to the TAXI road rally, which, by the way, the spouses, whether it's a husband or wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, I've had so many spouses come up to me over the years and say, I'm not a musician. I could care less about all this, and I am having the time of my life. What a great group of people, and I've learned so much more, and now I'm finally going to really support my husband's career making music. And then you go to Disneyland and have a little, me time with your spouse when it's all over. There you go.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And quickly, that's what I did. I think the third year that I went, we just kind of based our vacation around it. So I went to the rally for the 3 days, and then we went and drove the Pacific Coastal Highway for the following week and went all the way up to, I think we went to wine country and then back down, and it was an amazing trip. So we kind of piggybacked it with our yearly vacation, and it was great, kind of best of both worlds. So I think that's a great idea, and I know, I always meet many spouses and boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever it is, at the rally that are there kind of hanging out. And some of the material might get a little, their eyes might glaze over and stuff because it's just not their thing. But hanging out in the restaurants and the bars and in the morning getting coffee. But what were you saying is so true. Like I met so many people standing in line for the panels, or in the morning getting a coffee, or restaurant or elevator. I met a few people in the elevator for sure, and definitely in the bar at night, just hanging out and having great discussions and meeting people. And it's that kind of auxiliary to all the great classes and everything else in the panels during the day. Then you have this really great networking opportunities all day long, really.
And not to mention the registration line, just waiting to get your badge. I can almost guarantee you, if you're a first-time Road Rally attendee, that you will have made friends that will probably remain friends for the rest of your life while you're standing in line waiting to get your badge. We hear this story all the time. All right, Absolutely. Let's move on to number 2, because we've only got about 9 minutes left, and then I have to give away the see-through book, baby.
Nice.
All right, number 2. How long it takes to develop success. Let's hear about that.
Well, this I've kind of answered too, so I'll make it short, but it takes a long time. Like I would say, yes, I joined TAXI 10 years ago, and I've been really going after it pretty hard for the sync world for about 10 years. And I would say in the last 2 or 3 years is when I've really started to see what I would call, success is a relative term, but I think in the last 3 or 4 years, so that was 6 years of really hitting it hard and producing a lot of music, putting a lot of music out into the sync world. The last 3 or 4 years, I've really seen a decent return. And that is every year that is accelerated. I think it gets a little better each year because I've built that foundation. But I think that it just, everybody's different. But that's 10 years of sync. I spent 20 years, or 20 something years in the music business before that, playing live and doing production and doing everything. I was even a booking agent for a while for bands. Wow. Like every side of the music business I could do, I did. So, it just takes a long time, and it takes a lot of dedication and stick-to-itiveness, that word. But and the other thing too, I would say about this real quick, is that once you get what we would call success, I always use quotes on that, but what you call success, I said this last time we talked, but I'll say it again, is it doesn't necessarily get easier. It's not like you achieve the success and you're driving around in your Ferrari and everything's good. Because once you achieve that success, and you see this all the time, even with pop stars and people like this, they blow that money. Or they blow all the money they made and all the fame they made. They do something dumb, or they blow that money. Success is a relative term. For sustained success, let's say, that's a better term. I think that it just takes, you got to get up every day and work. Like the more that I find myself again, I'll use quotes real loosely, successful, I have to get up earlier. I have to do more. I have to pay more attention. I have to do a hell of a lot more admin work and that kind of stuff than I ever have in my life. So it's always just continuing to work. I think success is it unfortunately or fortunately, it's going to mean you have to work harder to keep that level of success. And we all know, you know people very well, Michael, that way. They just are working their tails off. And everybody's like, oh, they're so successful. But guess what? They're still working their tails off trying to maintain that level of success. Short of, I guess I call it winning the lottery, or even nowadays writing a pop hit. I know songwriters who have cuts and hits, and they're still trying to write that next song because the money these days isn't what it used to be. So I would say get used to working. Success is about working, and it takes a long time to develop it. And even when you develop it, you're going to be continuing to develop what you're doing and working at what you're doing. So,
I can talk about this at length, but I won't. But I'd like to add on something, which is that I thought that things would get easier once TAXI became successful. I would have more money, more prestige in, the business community within the music business. And you do just end up working harder. And it's tough because you have to make life choices. Is it family, quality of life, time with friends, or money? So I try to find a balance that in my case is clearly tilted more towards financial security for the family, so that at some point, I mean, I've lost about a half a dozen friends in the last 5 years, friends of mine that have died, and it breaks my heart. I want to make sure when I kick the bucket that my family, they don't need a private jet, but I don't want them to have to move out of the house and move into a trailer park because that's all they can afford. So I've concentrated, that's my love language to my family, is working really hard. I work a lot of weekends. I'm usually good for about 2 or 3 hours worth of work at night. I go through phases, after the road rally, I'll chill out for a month or two and only work like 40-hour weeks. But last weekend and this past weekend, the weekend before, I probably logged between 12 and 16 hours working on the weekend. So I don't do it because of avarice or greed. I do it because I love my family and I want to just make sure that they're safe if anything happens to me. Or down the road someday I may get to retire, and I want to know that I'm not, I don't want to be in position to have to worry about, can we fly to Orlando and visit the grandkids? If dropping $1,000 on that is stressful for me at the age of 80 years old and I can't go, then I've done something wrong. So I am a traditionalist in my job as the man of the family. Sorry if I've offended anybody out there. But I think that's what my role is. So think about it, balance it, and readjust. I guess that's the short version of what I'm trying to say is the way you approach that work-life balance will adjust over time and where you're at in your life. So there you go. Anyway.
Yeah. I will say that I appreciate you saying that. That's great advice, and probably some that I need to hear, because I do tend to just dive into the work side of things. And there is more to life than that. I mean, it's great to love what you're doing and have kind of, again, quote unquote, success. But sometimes you can get so enveloped in that there are a lot of other things in life that are just as much successes that you can forget or leave by the wayside. Friendships, relationships, whatever it might be, and I've struggled sometimes with that. So I appreciate you saying that, because it makes me think about it. And I do, but it is one of those things that's tough to balance when you're really trying to strive for something. And, as you know, with your business, and to try to make sure you make time for those things in life that are just as important, if not more. So it is a tough balance to strike. I'll say that. I haven't figured it out 100%.
Yeah.
So maybe find somebody who'll do a TAXI TV on that, and I'll learn something, because it's tough.
My 24-year-old daughter is the person in our family who's all about life balance. She really is. She was put on this earth to be that person. And I feel bad because she looks at life as like, nothing's more important than family. Oh, yeah? try and live in a one-bedroom apartment in a part of town where you have to literally be scared to death walking from your car to your front door at night.
Right.
That's what I've tried to prevent from my family ever having to
Yep.
do that. But she's grown up in a household. We're not rich, we're not poor, but anyway, yeah.
Right.
Sorry,
It is. It's a huge. It's that's a huge subject. It's a huge balance. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That anybody can even do it. But yeah, it is.
All right, and speaking of relationships, number one on your list is relationships are easily the number one key to success. So lay it on us.
Absolutely. So it kind of blends into everything we've talked about, of course. And I think we talked about collaborations. We talked about business partnerships, even friendships. What we just said about friendships, relationships with significant others, even all of those relationships. But in the business side of things. Relationships, I mean, there's no way I'd be doing anything without them. Like I've developed such great relationships with people we talked about, with you and with John Pearson, who I met at TAXI, the relationships with him that over the years, how that both of us helped each other in business that way, just kind of came up together and worked together, and they became friendships, they become friendships.
Real
I think,
friendships, yeah. Not just work friendships or friendships of convenience, but like you and Pearson will be friends forever. I can see that.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, and we definitely talk outside of business. We just, text each other. How's it going? Just it's a true friendship. And I think that didn't dawn on me until I really dug into this. I was always going for the angle of I got to meet this person because of this, or a lot of it did have ulterior motive. But it's really interesting now because I'll go to conventions. Like we talked about going to conventions, and I first just want to talk to somebody. I really don't care what their status is in the business or what they even necessarily what they do at first.
Yeah,
I just want to talk to somebody and get to know somebody. And I really do approach it at that angle. And even if it's somebody that I know is, let's say a music supervisor I want to meet or something like that, I don't like to just lead with business. I'd rather maybe they said something on a panel or something that was like I went to a convention recently and somebody said something about AI that I really agreed with. And we just started talking about that, because I thought it was really interesting and their view of it. And they literally said to me, hey, send me an email and mention the AI discussion. I'd like to keep talking about this. And I wasn't even intending for that, but they remember me because I didn't lead with, hey, listen to my music. Hey, listen to my songs.
That is the biggest turnoff. That's like a guy walking up to a single girl at a bar and going, I've got a Porsche outside and a really big bank account. Even if you do have those things, most women, at least quality women or people, I should probably say, are going to be turned off by that. And I can tell you what else doesn't work, which is talk to me, listen to my music. Why? Because I've got your family tied up in the trunk of my car. That definitely does not work.
That's not a great idea. That didn't work for me the few times I tried it. But I think I think it is. It's a matter of and you do realize that once you start kind of getting into business relationships that turn into friendships, those are the best kind. Yeah. Because I know you've talked about a few people like that in your life that you literally just go, have dinner or have a drink together and you're just friends, and then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we got to get that thing done in business. It's almost like, I don't want to say it's a side thing, but it isn't as important as the friendship at that point. And those are my favorite relationships. I have those kind of relationships with library owners. I have those kind of relationships now certainly with a ton of artists and co-writers and music supervisors. And those are the people that, we communicate. It's not this cold business relationship. We communicate with each other. We each know each other's wives and girlfriends and things like that. And it's a nice community. And to me, that's more fun to build than this mega business where you don't know anybody. I mean, and I do work with a ton of libraries, and I work with those libraries where you don't even get a response. And I enjoy working with libraries where I can talk to somebody a little more. I mean, I work with both, but the libraries or the supervisors that I really know, I look forward to working with them. I look forward to just talking to them, like with you. I look forward to just getting on here and talking with you or going to lunch with you. It's just a matter of, it's so key. I think that explains it all, but it's the crucial part of this that I didn't get for a long time. I didn't get exactly how to approach it or how to really be involved in it, and it was always a little awkward and uncomfortable. And that thankfully has changed for me, I think, just by the epiphany of, just get to know people and see. And sometimes it's not going to be a fit, either personally or professionally, and that's fine too. But you do meet your community and your group that you develop those relationships with, and that, that's the biggest thing. Like last time we talked, we were talking about everything that we were doing, and to me, that's just so interesting to me to just know like what you're doing and what TAXI's doing. And I just personally love that stuff. I guess I always have. So that does come somewhat easy for me, but it didn't at first. And it was always because my thinking was a little bit, I think, backwards to really how to approach things with that, and
it's hard to break out of that mindset. Like, I'm going to go to the road rally, and this is my elevator speech to every music supervisor or library owner I meet. You're 100% right. That just, at the very least, if you can avoid the subject of music, and definitely don't tell them you have their family tied up in the trunk of your car. That really doesn't work. But, don't talk about music. But if you can't think of anything else, if you saw them on a panel, say, yesterday on that panel when you said whatever it was that they said, everybody loves to hear about him or herself. So if there was a point that genuinely resonated with you, and they said it on stage, it gives them an open door to be conversant and at ease, which is where friendships start, is comfort. And so anyway.
It's so true, yeah.
Yeah, Rob Shirelli and I we're like brothers. We talk about this, and we're very close. Our families, our kids, we would spend some holidays together every year when the kids were younger, up until they became bratty teenagers. And he and I go out for lunches and dinners, I don't know, a couple times a month, maybe more often. And we could sit there for 3 hours and not talk at all about music.
Yep.
Even though that's how we met, was me engineering and producing some tracks for him when he was first getting started. But we'll sit there and talk about issues with the kids, or Rob had the greatest dog in the world named Astro. We could do a half an hour on Astro, Don't. He'll start crying, but...
Yeah, I get it. I'm a dog dad, so I understand that. But it's true. And that's the thing. And then eventually it will be like you have to call him about something business related or musical related, but it's almost like background isn't the right word, but it's not secondary, but it's just there. And it's like you do business together and things like that, but it's so much more comfortable and natural too. And it kind of stems off of the relationship and off of the friendship, Those are the to me, the most rewarding business partnerships that I have to this day. So it's so important. I can't overstate it, but and you're so right about going to the rally. Just get to know somebody, or, especially if it's going to be a collaborator, the only way you can collaborate well with somebody is if you really know how they work. I mentioned a Nashville write session for the second or third, I think it was the third time, with these great writers. The first time I was talking about imposter syndrome and nervous, and probably came across a little awkward because these guys are like hit writers, and I'm in the same room and I'm thinking, how the hell is this going on? Funny enough, they kind of met me because they want to learn more about sync. So, we had kind of that mutual respect. But the first time was probably a little awkward. By the third co-write, we're just kind of joking around and, leaving, and I'm giving them these treats from, my girlfriend works for this company that does, healthy treats and things like that. I'm giving them those as they're leaving and talking about going out. We got to go out to dinner sometime. I mean, that to me, it's like, okay, now I'm comfortable and this is great. And I know the next time we write, the songs are going to be better because we're just comfortable with each other. There's none of that awkwardness. And so I think if you can knock that out, it helps the whole process of everything that you're doing, creating music. So
I've got to give a see-through book away. We're a few minutes over time.
Sure.
This has been incredibly good stuff, and I really love speaking with you about it because you have a very everyman vibe about you. So you don't come off sounding professorial or like you're pontificating to people. If you're not believable, nobody is. So believe him, folks, because he's been through it, and this was great stuff, and I really appreciate the effort that you put into prepping for the show today. So that's that. I want to remind everybody, if you haven't given us a like or hit the subscribe button, please do. We're not trying to make a fortune. We're not even trying to make $1 on YouTube, but I do want the channel to become more popular so more people can learn this stuff. Next week, I'm going to try really hard. I'm not absolutely making a promise that this will be the show, but I am going to do a show on stingers, button ending stingers, and edit points with waveform patterns behind me on the screen instead of Criteria Studio D or E, whatever that is behind me. And I've gotten permission from a library to actually play the songs that go with the waveforms so that you guys will be able to listen to the music and that I can turn around and be like a weather lady, which would be really funny because from what I understand, it takes a little talent to learn how to do things in reverse on the screen. I am going to Matt Vanderbo's place, Andre, but not until the 14th. So next week will be, the 7th, I think, or something like that? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, the 14th. As a matter of fact, on my to-do list is right after we hang up from this episode, I'm going to call the airlines or go online and book a flight to Boise, Idaho. Party at Maddie's house. Anyway, let's give a book away. And here's how we're going to do it is, if you don't have this book already, and please don't start typing in, 10 times, just one time. The letter J for Jim. And then Liz is going to go like this, shut her eyes, go up and down the chat room with her finger, wherever the fickle finger of fate lands, that person is going to get an incredibly good book, which, by the way, if you haven't read it, Shortcuts to Songwriting for Film and TV is the only book on the planet Earth that we are aware of that teaches you how songwriting for film and TV is different than writing for records. And Jim, you're a great example of that, because having moved to Nashville and trying to break into the, songwriting for artists thing and now doing sync, it ain't the same thing.
No.
Some of the same craft, but it's not the same headspace and target.
No, definitely.
All right. Don Coyne, you typed in the letter D. It's supposed to be a J. And they're not even close to each other. Michael, add a little CU score tips next week. What's a C? Oh, maybe I need to move this over. Oh, Q versus score. Yes, I can try and do that. Although I'm not a composer, but I've known so many and learned so much over so many years, I could probably give you some stuff. I know what I can do. Oh, yeah, actually, no, I won't even talk about that now. I don't want to distract us. Boy, a lot of people must already have this. Not seeing a lot more activity. Give it another few seconds. And by the way, Shane Farber, I used to live at the intersection of South Dixie Highway and Kendall, very close to there. Right by, what was the name of the jazz club down there? The Checkmate Lounge. I would go see Chuck Mangione there, and about 5 years ago, I got on a plane. I have a gazillion miles on United. They upgraded me to first class. Who is my next door neighbor up there in row 3? Chuck Mangione. And I said to him, "Oh, Chuck, nice to meet you. I'm in the music industry. My name's Michael, and I used to go see you at the Checkmate Lounge every time you played there." And he looked at me like, "Shut up. I don't want to talk to anybody." I think he was afraid I was going to be chatty Cathy on the flight, which I could have been, but all right. Wow. And Shane Farber won the book. Congratulations. Or Faber, not Farber. Faber. Congratulations. Wow. Homeboy, you won a book. Yeah, I used to live at an apartment complex. I'm not even sure it's even there anymore. It's called Sun Moon Lake Apartments. All right, we will get this out to you. You'll probably get at least the part you can see will show up in the mail in about a week. Jim, thank you so much for doing this. It was everything I hoped for and more. Love hanging out with you. It was especially great hanging out with you in person 10 days ago, a week ago, whatever it was. And I will see all you guys next week for what might be an incredibly informative episode or a complete meltdown as I try to be Michelle the weather girl.
I'm going to watch that, Michael. That sounds good.
Oh, God, there's so many things I want to say, but I'll behave myself fine, you guys. See you next week. Another exciting episode of TAXI TV Live.
Thanks.